have to
Liam
go.
pushed his chair
No,
back
Liam,
so
please,
hard the glass on
don't.
the table jumped. "I can't do this tonight," he said, and the words cut the room into two. Betrayal hit me before I understood why his voice had gone flat. I followed him out the bar with my coat half on and a napkin clasped in my hand. He moved down the sidewalk without looking back. I caught up on the curb with my hand on the banister, breath fogging in the cool night. "Liam," I
Please,
said.
listen to me.
He kept walking. His shoulders were a small, stubborn island of grey in the streetlight. The argument had started at the table over an empty plate and a cheap joke I made about missing the old way he laughed. It spiraled because he would not answer the question that mattered, why he had stopped trying. I said it plain. He, "Not tonight," and stood. "I am Maya Collins. I have been married to Liam for 8 years. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment above a small bakery on Maple Street. We have a pattern. Work, dinner, a show on the couch, sleep. For months I noticed small absences, half smiles, late emails, dinners eaten alone at his desk, but I thought I could reach through them. By the time he left the bar, the pattern felt like a wall between us. My driving emotion that night was betrayal. That feeling shaped everything I did from the moment he turned away. I followed because my hands tightened on the banister, because I needed to force a conversation. The betrayal pushed me into action before I had a plan. At the curb, a man in a dark coat watched without stepping forward. He looked at me like someone checking the time on a watch, quick and calm. He did not speak until Liam was a block away. When he did, it was one sentence that did not try to fix me. "You deserve someone who notices you," he said, and he handed me a plain paper card. I blinked. The card said only a name and an address for a small place that offered counseling and creative writing classes. I folded the card into my palm and felt the heat behind my eyes. I did not know Ethan Vale then. I only knew the card and the way his gaze stayed steady when Liam left. I did not suspect a larger role for him. That night, though, his small interruption became a hinge that moved me from confusion into a sharper, angrier focus. The next morning I found Liam in the kitchen with his tie half undone. He was making coffee as if nothing had happened. I set my plate on the counter and placed my hand on the edge of the table. "Why did you leave last night?" I asked. Liam folded his hands and looked down at the sink. "I needed air," he said. "It wasn't meant to." "Meaning what, Liam?" My voice held a tight edge. "You stand up and walk away from our anniversary dinner. You leave and you don't look back." He kept his eyes on the mug. "You make it sound worse than it was." We argued. I walked out. I came back later, the facts without the shape of apology. I felt the emotion inside me tilt from raw betrayal to a hot, stabbing anger. My fingers traced the thin wedding band on my left hand until the metal was cold. "You always come back with words that smooth the surface, Liam. You smooth and nothing changes underneath." My voice got smaller as I looked at him. I wanted him to look at me. He would not. Liam folded his hands tighter. "Maya, I am trying to keep things stable. You know I don't like escalations." "We can talk later," he spoke like a man reading from a list of priorities. "Later doesn't get anniversaries back," I said. His jaw moved. "I know." Then he said nothing for a long, even minute. He turned the mug in his hands as if the motion would shift something inside him. When he did finally answer, his voice was low and practiced. "I don't know how to change overnight. I work long hours. I am tired. I keep thinking we'll find our way back on our own." The answer was not new, but it landed with a new weight because the previous night's image, him leaving in the middle of dinner, was very real now. Anger became a quieter ache. I left the kitchen with the coffee still warm on the counter and went to the bedroom. I pulled down the shoebox from the top of the closet shelf without thinking. The lid came off with a rasp. Inside were printed photographs, a paper ticket stub from the first movie we saw together, a note in Liam's handwriting dated the morning after our first apartment, and a pressed leaf from a fallen tree we had walked under on a summer night. Each item was small and particular. My fingers brushed the ticket stub and then the note. The memory was not a blur. It was the sentence he had written about laughing so hard we had both cried. I read it aloud into the quiet room. Hunger for that old warmth moved under my skin. It was not longing for a person in the abstract. It was a hunger for the specific ways he had paid attention. The sticky jam on the corner of his lip from a Saturday breakfast, the way he traced my hand when he was trying to fall asleep, how he used to ask about my day and wait for the answer. Those traces sat in that box. They did not explain why he had stopped. I spent the afternoon with my hands on the photographs. Each image shifted me from anger back to a quieter, etching sadness. I typed the date into my phone and then deleted it. I knew watching him closely would be the only way to get a straight answer. Suspicion grew into a plan. That evening after work, I drove to the office parking lot where Liam sometimes waited late. I sat in my car in the shadow between two delivery trucks and kept the engine off. My hand stayed on the steering wheel so I would not fidget. I could taste the coffee from the morning and the metal tang of nerves. When he arrived, he came alone at first. He walked across the lot in a navy jacket and carried a narrow briefcase. He met someone at the curb, an easy movement, a greeting that seemed private. Then they kissed. It was a quick, steady kiss by the car door. He kissed the woman and then leaned his forehead to hers for a second, fingers at her jaw. My stomach dropped. The concrete under my feet felt like a floor I could no longer trust. Shock moved through me into a cold, precise anger. I started the engine and stepped out of the car. I did not run. I walked up to them and said, "Liam." My voice was steady but small. The woman looked up. She smoothed her jacket and smiled in a way that did not reach her eyes. "Maya." Liam's face went blank for the first second. He blinked and then put his hand toward me. "Maya, I can explain." His voice had that same low, measured timbre. "Explain what?" I asked. "Explain kissing someone in the parking lot after you walked out on our anniversary." The sentence came in a rush. I spoke his name to hold him in place. He stepped back. The woman said, "I'm Claire." I didn't mean to, Claire. My hands were at my sides and trembling. I did not plan the next move. Betrayal bent into a sharper question. Had he been hiding things for months? Liam tried to take my arm. "Maya, let me." I pulled my arm away. "Don't touch me, Liam." I said it low and firm. Claire shifted nearer to the car and put her hand on the door handle. "Liam has been helping me with a project." "We were just, helping," I said. "Claire, this looks like more than helping." My chest tightened. The sound of rain starting on the lot roof kept time with the quickness of my breath. Liam's eyes dropped to the ground. I felt a sliver of something else move in me, an H that was not only anger but betrayal turned to cold clarity. My suspicion had pushed me here. The sight of them kissing made the pattern I had been guessing into a concrete image. "Liam, who is she?" I asked. He looked at Claire as if waiting for her to step in and tell the story. She only glanced at him and then at me. "Uneasy, we worked together," she said. "It was a mistake." I didn't. The words scattered. I needed to make him own the pause where he had meant to smooth things over. I took a breath and let the anger shape the next sentences. "When did this start?" I asked. "It's not what you think." Liam's voice rose on the last three words. "When?" I pressed. He stared at the asphalt. "A few months." "We didn't mean." I felt the world narrow to the wet crack of the pavement and the ring on my finger. The ring felt heavier than usual. The circlet of metal pressed cold against my skin. The confrontation outside the car became quick and jagged. I said, "You left the bar on our anniversary and you kissed her tonight." "I told you I was tired." I said, "You lied by omission." "No, Claire." "I'm sorry." I said, "Claire, please go." She closed the car door and left. Once she was gone, Liam's posture crumpled a notch. He dropped his voice and the practiced tone slipped. "Maya, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you this way." He sounded small. The words did not fit the size of what had happened. I wanted him to explain the months of distance, not only this night. "Explain now." I said, "Tell me the truth." I held my gaze on his face. He inhaled and fought with the words. "I started to pull away last winter. I couldn't find the right words to tell you. Work kept dragging me. I told myself if I could fix this, if I could stabilize things, I wouldn't have to change much in our lives. The steps like a list of failures." "So you looked for comfort elsewhere?" I asked. His throat worked. "It wasn't planned. It didn't start as that. But I was lonely and I made a bad choice." He paused. Maya, I didn't want this to be our end. Anger flared into a different shape. The fierce, shaking need for him to feel what I felt. My hands tightened until a small creak came from my knuckles. Liam, you chose to leave me at the table. You chose to kiss someone else. You chose not to tell me. We had the argument the way an electrical box sparks. Fast, loud, and messy. There were rapid exchanges, 3 lines, 5 lines, voices clipped, each one trying to land. You left, I said. I followed you out. You lied. I didn't mean to. You kept secrets. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't unring a bell. I know. He folded his hands as if folding something fragile. At the curb, the rain began to fall harder, small staccato taps on the car roof. The night smelled like wet asphalt and coffee. A car passed with headlights sweeping us in a wide arc. People around us kept moving as if the moment was not a fracture. When the exchange broke into silence, Liam, Maya, I can't promise I can go back to what we were. I don't know who I am inside what we had. His gaze did not meet mine. I felt something give way inside me that had nothing to do with heat or anger. It was the slow exhale of realignment. The betrayal had brought clarity. I had been chasing warmth that belonged to a set of small acts he had once performed. I had to confront whether I wanted to keep chasing the memory or insist on someone who could do the work now. I moved to the bench under the small oak and sat down without thinking. Rain formed rings in the puddles at my feet. I took the wedding band from my finger and held it between my thumb and forefinger. The metal was cool and familiar. I had traced it a dozen times when I tried to find courage. Tonight I needed the courage in a different shape. Liam knelt in front of me, the rain making his hair dark at the temples. Maya, please, he said. I did not answer immediately. My thumb drew the band along the curve of the bench where water pooled. The emotion in me moved again, anger to grief to a quiet decision. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but they ran steady and practical. I set the ring on the bench, then pressed it down so the rain would not roll it away. I can't go back to the version we had, I said. I miss how you used to notice me, but I can't pretend you did the noticing this whole time. I looked at him. If you can't be the man who does those small things, then I can't keep waiting for them to return. My hands did not tremble when I spoke. His face changed in a small, sharp way. He reached toward the ring. Maya, don't. I pulled my hand back. This is mine. I'll pick it up later if I want to. For now, it's where I put it. The words were plain and exact. He had no more practiced scripts to cover this. He tried to speak, then closed his mouth. He stood shivering with rain, and then turned and walked away down the path. He did not look back. The rain hardened into a steady sheet. I stayed on the bench until the streetlights thinned and the early gray of dawn grew at the horizon. My feet were cold, but I felt a small, solid clarity settle in my chest. I had chosen an action that matched the change I needed. I had turned the ring from a ritual token into an object that marked a boundary. At sunrise I walked under the trees on Maple Avenue. The path was slick and the leaves smelled like damp earth. My coat was still wet at the collar. I did not rehearse a speech. I walked with the ring left behind and with the card Ethan had given me folded in my pocket. The chapter of tonight closed on a concrete beat. The ring resting on a rain, slick bench and Liam gone down the path. The choice I carried was not a dramatic vow. It was a simple, physical fact I could not ignore. I had removed the band from my finger and left it where it could be seen, and that action made the next step visible. I walked on toward the morning light. I found the ticket with my thumb still wet from washing the wine glass. It was folded the way Liam used to fold receipts, tight enough to hide words, soft at the edges. Suspicion burned along my ribs the second my fingers brushed the paper. I held the ticket against the lamp and saw only the single word printed across the top, one way. That discovery became the problem I could point to. I shoved the coat back on its hanger and counted the steps from the chair to the bed, because I needed action before I let my head fill with questions. I went into the kitchen and turned the kettle on without looking at the clock. The kettle clicked. The apartment smelled of leftover coffee and Liam's laundry detergent. I told myself to breathe, then opened the bedroom door and found the suitcase by the door with the zipper half pulled. My hands tightened on the cup until the porcelain creaked. I thought of the bar the week before, the way Liam had pushed his chair back so hard the glass jumped, and he said, "I can't do this tonight." That night had ended with him walking away down the sidewalk. I said the word aloud, Liam. The name made the room smaller. Suspicion moved my feet before my head. I carried the ticket into the living room and set it on the coffee table between two coffee rings. I tapped the paper like it might speak. I wanted him to come home and tell me it was a mistake. I wanted a simple lie I could swallow. The kettle clicked again, and I realized I had been waiting for a sound I could understand. His key in the lock, a boot on the stair. He came into the kitchen 10 minutes later, rubbing his jaw. He wore the navy sweater he favored on late nights and a look that tried to be unreadable. "You left a cup on the counter," I said. I held the ticket between my thumb and forefinger so it was visible. He stopped Mayor, Liam. He folded his hands without meeting my eyes. "What is that?" "Where are you going?" I asked. He looked at the ticket as if it were a foreign object. It's for a conference," he said. "I might fly out tonight." The first feeling was raw anger. I pressed the ticket against his sleeve and said, "You didn't tell me?" My voice did not break, but each sentence came in tight pieces. Liam's jaw shifted. "We are not good at talking about everything, Mayor. You know that. We are married, Liam." I put the word like a weight between us. "You put a one-way ticket in your coat, and you didn't tell me." My hands shook. I traced the thin wedding band on my finger without thinking. He made a small sound that could have been regret or dismissal. "I can't do this every night," he said. "We have bills and Are you leaving?" I asked, "Are you leaving me?" He didn't answer for a full breath. Then, "I'm not leaving to hurt you." The words did not land as comfort. They landed as a refusal. I stepped forward and dropped to the floor, grabbing his arm. "Don't walk out again, Liam. Not like last time." My voice tightened when I said the last 4 words. I had the image of him walking away from the bar burned into the back of my teeth. He tugged his arm free. "Maya, stop. This isn't fair." He folded his hands, which was his way of staying practical. "We can talk about this calmly." "Calm won't fix a suitcase," I said. We spoke in short lines after that. The kitchen light threw a circle on the table. For 5 minutes the apartment became a series of clipped exchanges. "Where are you going?" "Possibly to Boston." "When?" "Tonight." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to argue." He looked at me then, finally, and his eyes were the blue, gray I could read when he stopped hiding. "Because I thought I could fix it before you had to worry." I went for the car keys. I did not wait for permission. Outside, the sky had the thin blue of dawn. I followed him as he moved faster than I expected. He had a small bag slung over his shoulder. I ran across the sidewalk and caught his sleeve. "Liam, stop. Talk to me now." My voice was raw from the run. He turned. "Maya, this isn't the place." He moved around me as if I were a minor obstacle. "This is the place," I said. Cars passed. A neighbor opened a second-floor window and watched. I put my hand on the handle of the car. "You are not making this easy, Liam." He pressed his palm to my shoulder with a slowness that felt deliberate. "Don't do this here. Tell me then." My voice rose. "Tell me now." I could hear my heart hammer in my ears. He looked past me toward the street and then into my face. "I can't make promises tonight." "Maya," that sentence split us. I stepped back. The car door closed. He drove away without turning to look. The sound of his engine swallowed the space where answers should have been. I stood on the curb with the suitcase at my feet and the ticket in my hand. People walked by as if nothing unusual had happened. My hands moved without permission. I checked the seat of the car as it disappeared around the corner. My throat tightened. Fear replaced hot suspicion. I ran my thumb along the fold of the ticket until the paper softened. I needed someone who could look at me and refuse easy answers. I found him on the park bench 2 blocks away. Ethan sat with his coat pulled close, a small book on his knee. He had the cashmere scarf he always wore even in mild weather. He looked up when I approached and returned a small item I hadn't noticed I'd dropped. "A thin grocery receipt folded in my palm, Maya," he said. He did not move as if surprised. "You need a taxi." I sat down opposite him. The bench smelled faintly of crushed leaves. My hands trembled. Liam left. He left a ticket. Ethan nodded like he had expected this might be happening. You found the one-way ticket? Yes, I held it out. Does it mean he's leaving? He tilted his head. It can mean many things. Have you seen his bag? He drove off. He glanced at my hand and then at my left ring finger. You still wear your ring, he said quietly. The observation landed in a different way than the ticket had. I had been braced to call him out for betrayal. Ethan's sentence made me notice the small actions I had kept performing, tucking my hair behind my ear, tracing the ring. Suspicion shifted into a different current. I felt exposed, like someone had pointed to a habit I hoped to hide. Why are you here? I asked. I needed the human detail. He moved his hands like he was arranging an invisible box. I saw you in the morning. I thought you'd come this way. I wanted to give you this back. He pushed the receipt toward me and then said, if you want to know why, go to his office, Liam's office. I asked. The suggestion surprised me. Yes. He left his laptop unlocked the other day. I saw a printed resignation letter on his desk when I walked past the window. It looked recent. The resignation changed the direction of my anger. Suspicion slid into fear that had nothing to do with another person in a hotel bed. I felt my shoulders rise. Resignation. Why wouldn't he tell me? Ethan touched his scarf. I don't know. But if money is involved, you should know. He did not say more. He never pushed. He never asked me to follow him. He only gave me the information I would need. I went to Liam's office after dark. The building smelled of floor wax and recycled air. The security guard recognized me and let me up with a nod because I used to pick up his mail. The office lights were off on the floor. I eased the door open and walked toward Liam's desk, every step measured. His desk lamp threw a pool of light over one corner. There was a resignation letter, dated 2 days ago, and an envelope filled with past due notices from creditors. The stack of notices had red stamps and printed sums. The letter said in even typed lines that he could no longer carry the company role without compromising product quality. That single sentence explained his exhaustion, but did not explain the late night silence between us. I read the letter twice. The facts rearranged my interpretation. I felt anger, but it shifted shape. It became concern, then bitterness that he had tried to contain the problem alone. I thought of the bar where he'd said he couldn't do it. I thought of the ticket. My suspicion turned into the question. Had he been planning a quiet exit to shield me? Or had he been planning to leave the life we had built because he could not face asking for help? I stood there with the papers on his desk and realized I had no right to decide how he handled his shame. But I had every right to insist he stop deciding for us both. I folded the resignation and the notices, tucked them into my bag, and left the office with the lamp's circle shrinking behind me. 3 nights later I found him at the station platform. The benches were empty. A late train hissed in the distance. He held the ticket between his fingers and looked smaller than he had in the office. He smelled of coffee and borrowed bravery. I walked up to him and did not ask for permission to speak. Liam, I said. My voice didn't shake. Why didn't you tell me about the resignation? He did not answer immediately. He watched the lights along the tracks and then looked at me. I didn't want you to worry. You hid it from me. I kept my sentences short. You bought a one-way ticket and you didn't tell me. You left a suitcase by the door. Why? He folded his hands in that practiced way and then let them fall. You remember the bar last week? I left after that. I couldn't figure out how to say the right thing. I thought leaving the town for a few days would give me room to decide. I thought I'd come back with answers. You thought you'd come back with answers, or you thought you'd come back alone. The train's announcement broke across us. A mechanical voice that didn't care which of us listened. He looked at me as if the answer hurt his own throat. I didn't know. He stepped closer. Maya, I was trying to keep you from the shame of it. I thought if I left and fixed things alone, I wouldn't drag you down. He closed his eyes. I was cowardly. I'm sorry. I wanted to lean into him and tear him open with questions. Instead, I let my hands move. I took the ticket from him and folded it into a smaller square. You used to tell me everything, Liam. me about the job offer you almost took in college. Me about the scar on your knee from falling off the swing when you were 7. Tell me why now you hide. He gave a small laugh that broke. I told you I couldn't do this tonight, he said, referencing the bar. I meant it then. But not like you think. I didn't mean I wanted to quit us. I meant I was tired of lying awake thinking of the numbers on bills and not knowing where to start. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to be weak in front of you. We argued with short lines. You left a ticket, Liam. I know. I shouldn't have. You left a suitcase. I was going to go find a lawyer. A lawyer for what? I pressed. For the company. For me. I thought if I left I could sort contracts without you feeling the pressure. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Maya, I'm sorry, the argument was not a wall. It was a series of doors that opened and closed quickly. People passed along the platform without looking. I had to force myself to speak without lecturing. Liam, you don't get to decide my exposure. You don't get to carry this alone. He swallowed, I know, then he did something I did not expect. He reached into his jacket and took out a small folded paper, an email printout with numbers circled. I was trying to fix payroll myself. I thought if I could find where the leak was, we'd be safe. I thought if I left for a few nights, I could stop the worst. I didn't plan to leave you. I planned to come back with solutions. That revelation changed the axis of my anger again. Suspicion had become fear. Fear became a clearer kind of hurt, abandonment mixed with worry. I felt my hands go cold. My fingers found the thin wedding band on his finger, where he still wore one at the base of his thumb. I reached and touched it. Liam, I said, if you were scared, tell me. If you needed help, tell me. My voice was not a demand. It was a list of actions. Don't buy a ticket behind my back. Don't disappear, he nodded. I won't make that choice again. There was a pause. The overhead lights blinked. A train rolled in on the far track and slowed. The sound filled the space between us. I looked at him and then at the ticket in my hand. The paper had the crease of choices. He folded his hands and asked in a voice that had my name inside it, "What do you want me to do, Mayor?" I said the truth. Tell me everything. Tell me the numbers. Tell me the calls you have stopped returning. Tell me the meetings you walked out of. Tell me why you thought the only way was to go alone. He began to speak in short sentences. He listed names of clients, numbers, deadlines. His voice wavered only once. I interrupted with questions. We traded lines like tools. He answered. People on the platform shifted weight from one foot to another, and the train's brakes hissed. Halfway through the exchange, Ethan appeared at the far end of the platform carrying a small envelope. He walked toward us and did not break stride. He put the envelope into my hand without speaking. The action was precise. He had folded the paper and tucked a photograph inside. I opened it. The photograph was of the two of us at a summer fair years earlier, our faces flushed, him holding a cotton candy, my hair braided. Someone had written a single line on the back. Remember how we used to plan weekends without spreadsheets? The note had no instruction, only a memory. Ethan's arrival created a mini cliffhanger in the middle of the scene. For a beat, everyone looked at the photograph as if a new fact had entered the room. It nudged conversation into a different register. The ticket in my hand felt less like a plan and more like a symptom of a deeper division. I folded the photograph and tucked it into my coat. Thank you, I told Ethan. He inclined his head and took a step back as if to give us space. The train's doors opened. People boarded. Liam and I stood on the platform with the ticket and the photograph between us. The argument tapered into a list of choices instead of accusations. We spoke in immediate next steps. Go home tonight. I said, bring the printed statements. We will call the accountant. We will make a budget meeting. We will tell someone besides just you. He looked at me as if he had been offered a map. You want me to come home? Yes, my voice did not wobble. Come home. Put the bag in the bedroom. Sit at the kitchen table. We will make a plan. He breathed out. Okay. The train pulled away with a long metallic sigh. We did nothing dramatic as it passed. We simply walked back to the car together. In the parking lot, I placed the ticket on his dashboard and then slid it back into his jacket pocket. I did not leave the ring on his desk there. I touched his wrist where the watch sat and felt the pulse slow. A week later, after meetings and phone calls and one awkward budget review where we argued in front of a consultant, I found myself in Liam's office again. The resignation letter remained folded on the chair, untouched. He had not mailed it. The overdue notices were still there, but we had a plan and calls scheduled. We had asked for help. That night I could not sleep. I went to the office one more time and left something small on his desk. I slipped my thin wedding band onto the polished wood beside the resignation letter. I did it without fanfare. I did it as an anchor. I walked back into the night and left my palm empty. 3 days later, Ethan left a note in my mailbox. He had placed a photograph with it, the same fair photo, this time with a different angle that showed my laugh more clearly. The note was small and careful. Stop deciding for her. Let her decide with you. He signed only his initials. I stood on the stoop and read the paper twice. I set the photograph on the table and watched the light from the street lamp tilt across the kitchen floor. My emotions had shifted twice in the chapter, suspicion to fear, fear to an uneasy clarity about what needed to be done. I had argued with Liam, chased him down a street, discovered evidence in his office, and forced him to name the problem aloud on the platform. Each action changed the shape of what would come next. I put the photograph into my pocket and walked to the mailbox. I closed it and lifted the flag. The concrete action felt like a hinge. A car drove past slowly. The night smelled faintly of rain that would not come. I went back inside and opened the door to Liam's place. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder of paper open in front of him. He looked up when I entered. "Maya, I left my ring on your desk," I said. I kept my voice steady. "I want to know we are a team before we make decisions alone." He stood and crossed the distance between us. He reached for my hand and did not speak for a full second. Then he said, "I don't want to lose you. I was wrong to assume I could fix this alone." I let him take my hand. His palm was warm and rough. I felt him press his thumb against the back of my knuckles. The gesture was not dramatic. It was a contract. We folded the papers together on the table. We made 3 phone calls. We scheduled a meeting with an accountant for Monday morning. We wrote down an itemized list of actions. Each entry was a small, practical thing. We read numbers and made decisions. I watched him answer the phone and felt the old familiarity return in how he said my name when he had to check with me. Later, when he went to the bathroom, I opened my coat and touched the thick crease of the ticket in his pocket. I smoothed it flat and tucked it inside my wallet. I did not throw it away. I did not frame it. I kept it because it had been a trace of the moment we had to speak. At 11:59 that night, a short note appeared on our kitchen table. Ethan had left it with no fuss. "You did the right small things." He had not put instructions, only witness. I read it twice, folded it, and slid it into the pocket of my jeans. I will not say this chapter closed everything. It did not. But by leaving the ring on his desk and by forcing the conversation on the platform, I created a boundary and a demand for honesty. I named suspicion in that first hour and let it steer me toward action instead of silence. The concrete events of the week, findings in his office, a public confrontation, and the photograph on the platform changed how we walked into the next days. The final thing that night was small and specific, a knock on the door. Liam opened it to find our neighbor holding a package for him. He signed with a biro and tucked the box under his arm. He looked back at me and said, "I will bring it in." I watched him cross the hallway with the parcel and felt the choice we had made sit in the room like a simple piece of furniture. It was not a cure, it was a decision to stop choosing alone. The chapter ends with me closing the kitchen door behind him and setting the photograph from Ethan onto the fridge with a magnet. The magnet clicked. The sound was ordinary. It was enough for now. He set the duffel down with a thud and turned his back to the city. Betrayal sat at the base of my throat the second he said, "I can't do this, Maya." I inhaled the cold air on the rooftop and tasted the last argument in his words. I grabbed the duffel's handle. "What do you mean?" I asked, because the chair he pushed back in the bar came back in my head, Liam pushing the chair so hard the glass jumped. And because I still had the ticket under the lamp with the single printed word, I couldn't read aloud without asking. Liam folded his hands at his waist. He did that when he wanted to stay quiet. I need space, he said. And his voice had the same measured pace as at the table the night he left, without saying where he was going. I felt a rush of anger then, a sharp motion that made my hands cold. I stepped between him and the rail and put one palm on the canvas duffel. Space from what? From our life, from the mortgage. From the way you go quiet when I try to reach you, I said. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second I saw the tired lines near his mouth that coffee didn't smooth. From the part of me that keeps letting you down, he said. The sentence landed like a small, precise blow. The rooftop light was hard. Cars below made a steady hiss. I thought of the bar, how he'd pushed the chair and left, and the folded ticket on my nightstand with its single, stubborn word. Those two images were proof that the threads between us had pulled thin. They were proof, to me, that something had been undone. We did not speak for a long, solid breath. Then a voice from below called up, "Hey, are you two okay?" A neighbor leaned over his balcony, phone shining. The private cut into a public place. Liam's jaw tightened. I stepped closer. "Tell me what you planned, Liam. Tell me why you left the bar that night, and why you folded a ticket and hid it from me." My fingers found the thin ridge of my wedding band and started tracing it. The motion steadied me. I thought leaving would stop the argument. He refused to look at the duffel. I thought distance would fix things. His hands were deft. The way he smoothed the bag's fabric, an attempt to rearrange what couldn't be rearranged. That was when the stairwell door banged and footsteps pounded down. Voices followed. I heard Sarah before I saw her, a rough knock on the emergency fire exit, then the click of keys. "Maya, open up!" She called in that exact half panicked, half practical way she uses when she thinks an emergency is solvable. I opened the stairwell door and the sound of 5 neighbors filled the stairwell in a second. Someone had called the building office. Ethan stood to my left, silent, hands in the pockets of his coat. He had been at my doorway 10 minutes earlier, and now he arrived like a quiet punctuation. "Liam, Ethan." He kept his voice calm, measured. "You can't just take the roof like this." There was no accusation in his cadence, only a steady boundary. Liam's eyes flicked to Ethan and then away. "I'm not taking it," he said. "I'm packing. I'm leaving tonight." I don't know how else to keep calm. The neighbors shifted. A woman with a stroller said, "We heard shouting. Is everything all right?" Her presence made the private moment common property. Liam's shoulders lowered, as if the building's attention made him smaller. Sarah pushed through the crowd, hands full of a folded envelope. She tapped me on the shoulder and handed the paper under the apartment door, habit, like a social worker passing an assignment. "This came slid under the door this morning," she said. "Separation papers. Someone left them last night, Maya. I thought you should know." Her voice had no flourish. She said what she saw and stepped back. My skin prickled. The envelope felt heavier than the paper inside. I slid out of the stairwell and sat on the lowest concrete step while Liam stayed near the door, voice low, as if he hoped words could be private even with a crowd. Ethan's hand on my elbow was cool. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. The notice was formal, typed lines and a signature block, then a date. The date was within 2 weeks. The paper introduced a hard deadline where our decisions had been floaty until now. It changed everything into numbers and timings and legal edges. Who would do that? I said, "Liam, did you file this?" My voice kept climbing. Liam's mouth moved. He folded his hands in front of him like he'd been taught that posture. "No," he said, "I didn't. I swear to you I didn't file it." Ethan stepped forward, then Maya, breathe, read the notice aloud. "Let's know exactly what we're dealing with." Ethan's presence cut into the panic and steadied the air. His pauses were small but deliberate. I read the notice out loud. The words were cold but simple. A demand to sign or respond, to start legal separation proceedings, dates, clauses about property. Each sentence sounded like a brick in a wall between us. "Someone wants this done quickly. Sarah." She scuffed her shoe on the stair and looked at Liam. "Did you know about this?" Liam shook his head. No. I didn't know who would push this, but he stopped. His hands folded and unfolded. He kept a distance from admitting anything bigger. We moved because the stairwell wouldn't contain us. I asked him to meet me at the park at dusk. He agreed, voice low. Ethan followed me to the street like a shadow with clothes. Sarah stayed in the stairwell to call a lawyer she knew without saying why. She had that curt, action-forward way of solving problems. At the park bench, the light softened and a few lamps flicked on. Liam sat with both hands on his knees and the folded letter between them. He slid it across the wood like a token. "Read it," he said. I recognized his folding instantly, the way he creased paper for receipts, for small notes he never left. The letter's edges were soft from handling. I unfolded it and saw a line of handwriting, quick and cramped. "I'm sorry," it began. Then it explained something I had not expected. Not an admission of an affair, not a new lover, but a plan. He had been trying to arrange a transfer at work, a temporary move to manage an account that could go under if he didn't step in. He had a meeting set, a list of payments to handle, and a plan that would force him out of town for months without telling me because he thought telling me would worry me more than it would help. I stared at his handwriting and felt the knot of betrayal loosen into another shape. It did not vanish. The knot became a confusion of reasons and missing explanations. Betrayal shifted into doubt. "You should have told me," I said. "You should have let me help." Liam's voice was low. "I thought I'd fix it before you had to carry it. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me," I asked, "by leaving me in the dark, by letting someone slide a separation notice under our door." My hands tightened on the paper. He swallowed. "I know it looks terrible. I know I chose wrong. But I thought if I left, I could untangle it without dragging you through the worst." Ethan watched from the bench's far end. He tilted his head, as he always did when he listened, and his voice was plain when he spoke. "Maya, protection that hides you is still a withdrawal. You lost a partner in the rooms where you needed one most, so do you think I should forgive him?" I asked Ethan. My voice came out small. Ethan looked at Liam and then at me. "I think you deserve to name what you need," he said. "Forgiveness is separate from deciding what you will accept back into your life." Liam's shoulders rocked once, an almost hidden tremor. "I am sorry about the bar and the way I walked out. I am sorry for the ticket you found. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was sparing you. I thought of the night he left the bar and how my coat half hung from my arm. I remembered following him, the napkin clasped in my hand. I thought about the ticket folded on my nightstand and how my thumb had still been wet from washing a wine glass when I found it. Each memory hit like a small, concrete wound. We argued there on that bench with a rain, scented wind moving the lamplight. Our voices cut and softened. The neighbors had dispersed. A dog barked. Each interruption forced a short pause where one of us recalculated. "You'd stay." I reminded him, "You vows." And then you pushed a chair back at the bar and walked away. You left me to stand there and guess what you meant. Liam's reply was quick and raw. "Maya, I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to show you why I did it. Let me explain the ledger, the transfers, the creditors. Let me show you proof I wasn't running because of someone else." I asked for details. He showed me a stack of emails and a list of accounts. He described a contractor who'd vanished, a company that missed payroll, numbers I couldn't pass on the bench's slatted wood. His voice picked up a tempo when he explained the financial collapse he had tried to mediate alone. There was a twist in that moment, a turn that changed the shape of what had felt like betrayal. He had not boarded a plane to a lover. He had been trying to keep a roof over our heads by stepping between a failing business and our name. That was not dignity. Spending weeks in secret was cowardice. But it was not the simple, sharp infidelity I had feared. I felt another shift. Anger replaced by a complicated sort of pity, then slid into clarity about what I needed. I could be angry at his method and still see the intention behind it. I could refuse the secrecy without rejecting the man who had tried to solve it. We had a rapid exchange then, 3 sets of short lines, quick and blunt. "Liam, why didn't you tell me even one part of this?" I asked. "I thought I'd be blamed if I failed." he said, blamed or helped. I shot back, blamed, he repeated. I couldn't carry that look. You think I want the look? I asked. I want to be told. I want to know what's breaking so I can choose to fix it with you or not. He closed his eyes. The rain began as a fine thread, then steadied into a whole grey curtain. We did not run for shelter. Rain us a question and we answered with the movements of our hands. I reached for the thin ring on my finger. I had been tracing it for months when I tried to think. I slipped it off and held it between thumb and forefinger. The metal was cool. Liam watched me the way a man waits to see a child's reaction to a cut. Don't, he said at first, but his voice came out small. I put the ring down on the bench between us. It made a small, definite sound. You tell me you were trying to protect me, I said. But you didn't protect me from the consequences of secrecy. You left me to find a paper under the door. Liam's face shifted. I could see the guilt become a plan inside his jaw. He reached out, then withdrew. If you'll let me, he said, I'll step back into this honestly. I'll open the files to you. I'll stop keeping things in the dark. I'll go to the meetings with you. I'll stop walking away. At that line, the rain hit harder and the bench slicked. My hands were wet. The ring was there like a small literal choice. Ethan, who had been quiet, spoke then. Maya, what's acceptable is yours to name. Liam can offer repair, but you get to decide the terms. Sarah arrived with 2 paper cups and a blanket. She sat on the far bench like an ally who knew the practicalities of comfort. You both need to set steps, she said. Don't make promises you can't prove. Show me a first step and then a second. We listed steps in the rain. We named times to meet with an accountant, dates to check the paperwork, explicit small actions where we would not disappear. Naming the steps changed the argument into a plan, and the plan made repair possible or not, depending on what each step produced. But naming steps did not remove the H of having been left. That H shifted into a test. Would he follow through? Would he stop folding his life away without my knowledge? My suspicion loosened into guarded hope, and then into a sharper demand for proof. When the rain slowed to thread, I made a decision that felt like calling checks on both of us. I told him I would not sign anything until we had a lawyer look at the papers. I told him I needed open accounts and shared access. I told him I would not accept secrecy as protection again. Liam listened to each line I read. He nodded slowly like a man measuring the distance of a long step. I agree to everything, he said. Open books, meetings. No more alone decisions. Ethan held my gaze, and if he breaks those terms, he asked, then I respond in kind, I said. I did not say punish. I said respond. I meant boundaries. I meant consequences that preserved my life. He one last question as the rain stopped. Will you try with me? Will you stay and try? I looked at the thin wedding band on the bench and thought of the nights when we laughed in the kitchen. The morning he held the coffee while I burned the toast. The small domestic habits that had once felt like home. I also thought of the chair slammed back at the bar and the ticket folded under the lamp. Both histories lived in my hands. I picked up the ring slowly and slid it back on. I will try with conditions, I said. I will try if you keep everything out in the open. I will try if you do the work with me, not for me, he exhaled, a long release that might have been relief or a new kind of grief. Sarah clapped once, a small sound of solidarity. Ethan simply nodded and tilted his head, the way he marks the end of a negotiation. The test that surprised me came 3 days later. The separation notice turned out to be filed by a creditor's attorney attempting to force our apartment sale. It was not a legal separation we had started, but an aggressive action from outside that had tried to co-opt our private fracture. That revelation changed who the antagonist was. Not just our silence, but a company that would take advantage of our silence. I called the lawyer Sarah had found. We met at the kitchen table, the papers spread between us, and Liam sat across, hands flat on the table. He read the legal notice and the creditor's filings aloud. He explained a set of transactions that had been misreported. He named names. The facts reframed the early accusations. After the meeting, when the house felt like something that could be measured again, Ethan came by with a thermos of tea. He sat on the couch and asked me how I was. "Do you regret giving him another chance?" he asked plainly. I took a long sip of tea and looked at the locket at my throat. "I don't want to regret being thoughtful," I said. "I want to avoid being blind." Ethan nodded. "Good answer." He glanced toward Liam in the kitchen, who was making a list of meetings. "He will have to show you the steps." Keep him honest. The real test came at the rain, slicked bench that had become our place for decisions. I met Liam there, and he had a small box in his hands. He opened it, and inside lay a plain, worn ring he had kept for years, our ring from a simpler time, and a folded paper that listed the first 5 actions he would take, signed and dated. "I've booked meetings with the accountant," he said. "I've set a weekly review." I gave access to the accounts. I told the firm to stop filing anything behind our backs. "I'll attend every appointment with you." My hands curled around the box. The rain started again in a steady, even way. I could hear the water hit the metal bench. I felt the band on my finger, the little dent from years of work. I had a final demand. "I need you to admit the harm your secrecy caused out loud," I said, "not because I need an apology to forgive, but because names clarify what we were fixing." He looked at me and said, "I see the harm. I chose to hide instead of to invite you. I left you to discover papers while you slept. I hurt you by not trusting you enough to share the risk. I'm sorry." There was a pause long enough for a car to pass and for us both to feel the weight of terms. Then I did something small and physical. I took my ring off again and placed it on the bench between us. The action was not dramatic. It was a measured test. "If I pick the ring back up when you prove these steps, it will mean I choose to rebuild with you," I said. "If I don't, it will mean I choose a different version of myself." Liam's hands closed around his own paper, and he nodded once. "I will prove it to you step by step," he said. We left the bench that night without the ring on either of our hands. The rain had cleansed the wood, and the ring sat there like a concrete promise. We walked back toward the apartment with Sarah and Ethan joining us. Sarah talked logistics. Ethan kept the mood practical and human. In the apartment, we sorted small objects that had come to mark our life. Chipped mug that was his, a scarf I had dropped last winter, the worn locket at my throat. Sarah stayed until late to help box things and call the accountant. Ethan sat quietly by the window and offered simple, useful advice about scheduling. Their presence was not sentimental, it was functional support. The days that followed were not cinematic reconciliations. They were spreadsheets, lawyer calls, missed deadlines, apologies that needed to be repeated in new forms. Liam met with the accountant and brought me copies. He answered questions I asked in plain language and let me check his emails. When he forgot to tell me one small meeting, I reminded him. When he followed through, I noticed and named it. We argued fast and raw, 3 to 5 short lines at a time. We had nights where silence returned because one of us was exhausted, and we had mornings where we sat with coffee and read financial statements. Each event moved the story forward because we did not let secrecy pool again. Mid-chapter, there was a shock. A creditor filed a continued motion despite our lawyer's letter. The motion threatened an emergency sale unless we posted a bond. My stomach flipped. This unexpected legal bite pushed us into immediate action. Calls, signatures, urgent meetings. It was a small cliffhanger that forced daily checks and increased the stakes. We handled it together. Liam drove to the meeting with the creditor. I sat in the waiting room and clutched my locket while the receptionist paged him. When he came out, he had a signature and a plan. He had pushed back and negotiated a hold. We breathed. That hold bought us time to prove the financial corrections. With each document we fixed, my suspicion loosened and clarity tightened. I moved from suspicion to guarded testing, and then to a decision process I could own. At the end of the legal fight, when files were corrected and the bond held, the creditor's pressure eased. We stood on the balcony that watched the street, and the city felt the same, but not for me. I recognized 3 names: Liam Archer, Ethan Vale, Sarah. Each had helped in a distinct way. Liam had made the messy choice to act alone. Ethan had kept me steady. Sarah had turned worry into practical defense. The final scene arrived on a morning in golden light. I walked the tree-lined avenue with my locket in my hand and the ring back in the small box in my purse. The apartment gate clicked behind me. I did not feel theatrical victory. I felt the precise quiet of someone who had measured a choice and taken it. When I reached the bench where I had left the ring, it was empty. Someone had moved it or taken it. There was no dramatic message. Instead, there was a small, practical note tucked under the slat. I will meet the accountant. Lunch Tuesday. The note was concrete. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. I still had a decision to make, but now it was mine on terms I had named. I closed the worn locket, felt its metal warm in my palm, and stepped through the apartment gate. The choice I had made lived in actions, meetings kept, papers shared, conversations held, rather than in a single speech. That is where the version I chose lived. In repeated acts that proved a person could be different, or else let me leave. I walked on, and each step was a small, exact decision about boundaries and giving chances. The city smelled like wet pavement and wood smoke. I kept the locket closed against my shirt and the paper note in my pocket, both plain proofs of what had happened and what I would watch for next. The chapter closed on a concrete beat. The sound of my apartment door shutting behind me while Liam sent a text confirming the next meeting. I read the message, put the phone away, and started making a list of 3 things I would ask at that lunch. The list felt like a tool, not an ultimatum. The version I chose would be tested, and I would test back. I would not leave the testing to silence again.